I'm going to record.
Stay close to the mic.
Yeah, we'll stay close to the mic.
And we're recording, so we can go ahead.
All right, so let me do this. 11:08, let's call the July meeting of the PD River Basin Council to order. Tom, are you recording?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Standard, you guys got the meeting agenda in advance with the objectives. The main objectives today were the field trip. I'm not going to read them to you. They were the field trip and then going through future implementation activities, which is chapter 10, to see if there's any more thoughts on that. And also to talk about a couple of the chapters, and Matt's on the phone for that. Any updates or changes to the agenda for anybody? Okay. Hearing none, Tom gave out minutes of the May meeting also a couple of days ago. Thank you, Tom. Any corrections or anything on the minutes that need to be changed at this point? Anybody see anything? Okay, hearing none. John Crutchfield, like he's making a motion here, and Buddy Richardson seconding. So we have a motion, a second, to accept the minutes from, did I say May or is it June? We didn't meet in June. June.
1 minute, 1 hour.
This is the June first. Do we approve the May meetings, then, guys? I know I got a meeting. We've got a motion and a second for the June meetings. That's the one that went out, right?
Correct. Just
Okay, so this is the June motion and a second. Any discussion on motion and second for the June minutes? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, I hear none. Okay, Tom, that motion passes unanimously unless you saw somebody raise their hand online there.
Nope, we're all good. Thanks, Judy.
Okay, so as we always do, we'll open the public comment period now. For anybody that may have public comments, of course, we don't have anybody in the public here at Sunoco. Anybody online with a public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll keep that open. Any agency comments at this point? Okay. All right, hearing none, I'm gonna close the public comment period and the agency comment period. And we'll move to Leanne, if she is online, to give us the status of the groundwater model. Leanne?
Andrea.
Andrea, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I know the difference. You were hoping it was Leanne, weren't you?
Well, that would have been fun, but no, I'm sure she was like, oh my God.
Yeah, that was a little stressful for a minute.
All right, Andrea,
Okay.
that's yours.
So, everybody, I hope you had a good morning at your field trip. I'm here with what I think is pretty good news. We're in the process of what we call the pre-Monte Carlo part of the calibration of the parent model. So this is the part where we start eliminating all of the major outliers in the results and then get a tighter set for which we then do the full inversion calibration. So we're pretty happy about where we are right now. I am gathering all of the information that I need for the then once we get this parent model calibrated to start working on the inset, I pretty much have all the information I need for that calibration. The only caveat there is we were hoping to calibrate the inset model through 2023. But in speaking with North Carolina, they're not going to have their water use data completed until November for 2023. So it's not to slow things up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to calibrate the PD inset through 2022. And I know that's not what we wanted to do, but it's the best available data that we will have at this point, and we won't have to wait then until the end of the year to calibrate the inset. So I thought that was kind of the best decision, executive decision, if you will, going forward. So that's pretty much where we stand. I don't have any pretty pictures to show today, but I will at next month's meeting. And I'm still pretty happy and confident where we stand with the model at this point. So does anybody have any questions or comments about that?
Question for Leanne. I have one. When will we start seeing results from back end from the inset model, Leanne? Is that September? Is that October? How does that stand right now?
We are hoping to have the first 2 scenarios from the inset model in September. And barring, barring no disastrous, and you know how modeling goes. And then it would probably be October, but we're still aiming for the first 2 scenarios in September and then the second 2 scenarios in October.
Okay. So I think that's good. That's probably you're close to your original schedule or your original schedule.
Yep.
I think we'll be talking with the leadership team probably about just what that means as far as public notice and
Of course.
get the draft document out and how far that puts us on the timeline and what we can do maybe in the interim as we wait on those insets or not of what we do, right? Because I know at one point
Right.
I was trying to get it wrapped up by the end of the year and probably not going to make that with the public notices that have to be done and 2 votes that have to be taken on the final plan. So we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Any further discussion on that groundwater model?
I had just a quick question. Andrea,
Mhm.
we'll potentially want to test some mitigation strategies if we find projected, long-term declines in groundwater levels in some
Right.
areas. Is that something you think we can kind of
That
incorporate in that
is
September?
that is something that once the initial 4 agreed upon scenarios are conducted, then there's room in the contract to then test maybe 2 mitigation strategies. We did something similar in the Edisto Basin.
Yeah.
So, what if we move, 30% of the pumping to a different aquifer? What if we, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
then things like that are absolutely possible. We have done that. You all would have to decide kind of once you see the scenario results, what you would like to do at that point. So,
Okay. And
Let
that's
me-
the nature of the simulations I was wondering about. So thank you.
right. Sure.
Let me repeat what I heard. So the first 2 inset scenarios come in September, the way it's
Mhm.
looking. That means the second 2 come in October.
That's
That
correct.
means there's room in your contract to do some other scenarios and fine tuning, but that would be all be after October once the 4th scenario was run.
Yes,
And just
that's
making sure
correct.
the timeline, not good or bad, that's just the timeline.
Now that's as I recollect at this time, as far as, additional scenarios are concerned. I see that Scott's online. Scott, do you want to comment on that? I'm afraid uh, I don't specifically remember the details of the additional scenarios and wanted to kind of know your thoughts on that.
Andrea, I'm still having some virtual meeting issues up here
Oh,
in
sorry.
my new office. Every now and then, like I lose audio for like 4 or 5 seconds. It's
Oh, I'm
periodic.
sorry.
And can you repeat?
Of
You hit one of
course.
those periods. Can you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
Of course. Well, my question is I mean, originally, like we did with the Edisto Basin, we had done 4 basic scenarios, and then they wanted certain combinations of mitigation strategies performed.
Right.
And I believe we had built that into the contract, and I just wanted to double check with you and make sure I'm remembering that correctly and kind of your thoughts on that, like how you would like to handle that.
I believe that testing different management strategies was built into the contract similar to
Mhm.
the Edisto.
That's what
And
I'm remembering, yeah.
I think that, well, it's really hard to make a decision on um, how many water management strategies we might look at until we first see the results from the scenarios to kind of
Sure.
guide the RBC. So I think there has to be room to test a few mitigation strategies in our schedule. But how much, we'll just have to wait. And it may also depend on, the RBC, how far do they want to go with this
Right.
as well. So
Let me ask one more logistic question, which I thought Matt was going to ask. So there is a part in the report that we've got to get written about the groundwater modeling, groundwater information.
Mhm.
And so if we play with a scenario where we got a report, final draft that we could put out the public comment without the final scenarios being run, what's the chances of getting text before September for that part of the report? Is that possible? I'm just asking. I'm not trying to rush. I'm just asking, try to keep the timeline.
That's a good question. You
All right,
want,
let's take that consideration with the leadership team. But y'all, RBC
Yeah.
sees the question I'm trying to facilitate here is,
yes,
is there a way to get something out to the public and get that process going,
of
even
course.
if we have to end it later with some groundwater results? Or do we'll just wait until we get all the groundwater scenarios in before we push it to the public? And I'm good either way. I'm just a facilitator. So that's where we got to hear everybody's opinion of timelines.
My opinion, if we wait till everything's done, that way you keep everybody in touch, because if they see a partial thing, gonna be changing again, they're not gonna. Well, it might do it initially, but it won't follow through, in my opinion.
Right. And I think that's where I'm thinking it, but that may be December before that gets done. Before we go to public comment, which would make it March before this thing would probably wrap up. So we'll have to look at timeline, but that's just, Brooke, does that sound about right if we go that way? Okay. We don't want to commit to it now. We just need to talk about it and I want to get it on the table first. Okay. All right. Leanne, very helpful. Thank you. Thank you for the progress. I said Leanne again.
Yep.
Andrea, I'm sorry.
It's not a problem.
I must be seeing Leanne in the corner of my eye on the screen more
There
readily
you
than
go.
I'm seeing you. So, okay. So I don't have much on the implementation options. We wanted to put it on the agenda to talk about it for a couple reasons. Chapter 10 needs to be written for one thing, and that's all about implementation. Two, we know that the new reorganization has now gone on. We knew that was going to happen July 1, so that's gone on. That could shape how implementation and funding for implementation would look. Also, being here at Sunoco, for those who aren't here, this was a great tour today, and I'll let Cliff talk a little bit about it more in a minute. But this was a great tour today, and I think it shows us. I'm looking at Duke, I'm looking at IP, I'm looking at Santee Cooper here. You know, there's a lot of good corporate citizens in this basin, in addition to the ag and the municipalities that could be part of this implementation and helping to drive forward. And goodness gracious, this is a great facility we're in right now. If we had to have meeting space we couldn't get from Clemson, this is a great alternative kind of in the middle of the basin too. So really, you know, one extreme, implementation is just something driven by the state, and we have a team of people that we keep together, and there's no funding or collaboration or anything done by the private sector. We just kind of let the state lead it. Or the other extreme is this group can be part of that and really help lead it more, or it could be a partnership, right? But we've got to get chapter 10 written, and I'll let Matt talk a little bit about it, about how you guys, we don't have to make that decision today, obviously, but we need to start honing in on how you guys really think, after all you've seen for now a little over 2 years, how this keeps legs underneath it as going forward to make it what we originally said in the PPAC and other organization levels, to make it more of a living and keep it going for years to come and not just die like a big fat plant on the shelf, right? Any thoughts as you've been on the tour today, or any thoughts even from the agencies as they've gone through reorganization? Any thoughts about how any of that impacts the implementation chapter? Okay, I'm hearing none here. So if anybody online's got anything, that's good. Or Matt, if I'm missing anything that I needed to say there to help you write that chapter and move the report to the final draft. Anything else from you?
Maybe just a couple things. Just looking at the planning framework requirements, and sort of what's been done in other basins. I think that with respect to implementation, we've done a lot of the things that I think we need to do to get ready to write that chapter. The implementation, there's basically the implementation comes down to identifying implementation objectives and then actions that will be taken to meet those objectives, and what's a kind of a general timeline and budget for doing that. And then we also need to develop some long-term implementation objectives. So there's shorter term, which is 1 to 5 year actions, and then there's longer term objectives. Some of those longer term objectives are probably very consistent with the shorter term objectives. You're just maybe in the long term making adjustments based on what occurs in the first 5 years. But I think a lot of the things that we've talked about, like demand side strategies, we've talked about a wide variety of those, and how those might be prioritized by the RBC. Well, what's the implementation objectives for that, and what are the actions that can be taken by the RBC to help implement those demand side strategies. A lot of those demand side strategies, whether it's for ag or whether it's for municipalities or industry, are going to be actually conducted by the stakeholders in those industries. The RBC doesn't necessarily have the authority to implement those strategies. But what can the RBC do? The RBC can educate. The RBC can communicate and be a collaborator on implementing some of those strategies. So as we think about the recommendations that had been made throughout this process, and that we'll be describing in chapters 7 and 9, and also in chapter 8 with respect to drought management. Those are the kinds of things that will show up in the implementation section. And then the RBC will need to think about, all right, well, what's our role in helping to make these recommendations a reality. So over the next, I think probably a couple of months, we'd like to dig into that and put the implementation chapter together, certainly in collaboration with you all. So any questions on that or any additional thoughts there, JD?
No, I think that's good. It's really how this RBC sees it playing its role going forward. So
Cool.
okay.
Cool. Should be good
Okay,
discussion.
So more on that later. We would have loved to have you all the final drafts of all the chapters ready by August. That was kind of one of our goals. I think the groundwater we can't get all that written anyway. So let's think about implementation and talk about it again in August, and then we'll come back in September. Hopefully that chapter ready for the subcommittee is sometime in September.
Yeah.
Okay. Matt, you got the floor next on the different chapters. I know you've sent a lot of information out, or at least I've gotten a lot of information. So you got the floor.
Yes, sir. Okay. The chapter that's active right now with respect to the RBC is chapter 6. And I sent that out to folks on Thursday last week for your review, hoping to have comments back by Friday, August 9th. I sent that chapter out to the RBC in Word format. So if you have comments, you can redline that document, or you could just simply send me an email back with any comments or thoughts you have on chapter 6. Chapter 6 focuses on surface water strategies. It's really kind of a menu of strategies that that can be taken in the basin, both to reduce demands or to boost supplies in order to enhance, water supply sustainability. And then, as you recall, we'll take the content of chapter 6. We have taken the content of chapter 6 and all those strategies, and then prioritize those, and that'll be described in chapter 7. Chapter 6, the content of that, if you haven't popped it open, it describes each of the different water management strategies, both on the demand side for ag and for golf courses and municipalities and industry. And then it also describes the supply side strategies that are on the menu. It goes through that technical evaluation of strategies that John Boyer conducted a while back. The objective of that technical evaluation was to see, if we implement different levels of water conservation throughout the basin, what difference does that make to stream flows and shortages and potential risks to environmental attributes. And the short version of that was it didn't make a ton of difference. I mean, there aren't surface water shortage risks or big risks going forward. That doesn't mean that these strategies are not worthwhile. They, in a lot of cases, can lower costs for industry or for ag, and it can build resiliency in the event that our projections, unforeseen things happen. And so they're good things to focus on, and good just day-to-day practices. But anyway, so there's that technical evaluation of strategies. And then for each strategy, there's a feasibility evaluation, and then there's a cost benefit discussion for each of the strategies. Again, it's focused on surface water at this point. We'll circle back around once the groundwater modeling is done and update it to include that information. It has been reviewed by our subcommittee, got some really good and thoughtful comments back. Lindsay provided some editorial comments, which were good and definitely helped the text, and then asked the good question where we're talking about supply side strategies and specifically new storage. It would be useful to include a description of the storage in the basin right now. So it would help then inform new storage strategies. And so we added a paragraph there summarizing some things that have been included in various chapters to help better frame up what that supply side strategy might look like. And then Jeff Steinmetz provided several comments as well. We did a little bit of reorganization, adding some section subheadings to make it a little easier to navigate. Jeff asked some good questions about some of the summary, some of the strategy descriptions, added some notes on including education objectives and actions with regard to the use of native vegetation. Certainly in a municipal landscaping context, native vegetation just naturally uses less water and could be a good thing to call out. One thing that we did was, I just mentioned that technical evaluation and highlighting the fact that water conservation strategies are still a good thing. And Jeff picked up on that and suggested that we really sort of hit on that. So I took what was some text in that chapter, just a couple paragraphs and a few bullets, and turned it into a call out box that really sort of highlights the importance of some of those statements. And then finally, Jeff kind of dug into some of the cost benefit analyses and asked for a little more detail or a few additional case studies to really sort of demonstrate the economic value of some of the strategies. So all of those edits and comments have been incorporated into the version that I sent out to the RBC the other day. And just again, really appreciate the time and thought that the subcommittee put into reviewing Chapter 6, and interested in additional comments from the RBC. So I'll pause there and see if anybody has any questions on Chapter 6. Okay. So hearing none.
Wait a minute, we got one. Doug's got one.
On page 38, the farmers are encouraged to switch from long season varieties to short season varieties that may experience loss in yield and therefore revenue. However, they will also see a cost savings from reduced seed, pumping, fertilizer, harvest, and water use costs. I don't believe seed and harvest will be a cost savings. The short season variety seed will cost the same as the longer season variety seed, thereabouts. There's no savings in seed. There will be some savings in fertility and pumping, and in the harvest. On the harvest side, the harvest would not be any cost savings, but the handling of the crop after harvest, there may be a little bit of cost savings, but I don't know if that's a good thing or not. If you're handling less, it costs less, and you don't want to handle less. That's one thing that I saw. And on page 6.
Okay.
Page 6, talking about cover crops.
Uh-huh.
If I can find it right quick, I don't waste anybody's time. Cover crops, where are they? Previous page. Anyhow, I thought it was on page 6, but I may be wrong. It's on the cover crop suite. It was talking using cereal grasses or legumes. They need to add in there, would use cereal grasses, legumes, and brassicas, either singly or in a mix. The push now is to use a mix of cover crops, using brassicas or rape, turnips, radishes, tillage radish, not a little red radish, camelina and a few other things. That's the brassicas. But those three groups of species are encouraged in cover crops because they all bring a little something different to the table. But I would like to see that, either singly or as a mix. But we need to mention brassicas as along with legumes and grasses.
Okay.
We'll backfill with that writing to you too, Matt, I think.
Yeah, I'll send that to you.
Okay, that'd be great. That'd be great. I was taking some notes here. I think I got the gist of what you were saying, but so I'm absolutely clear. An email would be fantastic. So, and we'll get that added.
Any other comments or right now? I think Matt said August 9th was his date, but he'd like to have them back. So if you don't have any now, please provide them to Matt by the 9th. Couple comments on Chapter 7, Matt. You may were going to mention that. That's the prioritization. We had one ballot that from online that was the blank ballot, not the filled out ballot. So I've got that a few weeks ago. So that's not holding us up. We had a couple other people going to send ballots in And I'm in the process of getting those, but I haven't gotten them in my hands yet. So before we finalize the graphics and everything, we want to make sure we had all the ballots that were coming incorporated. So that's one thing.
So for the people who were there, you don't need anything more from us?
No,
Just-
I've got everything that was there and filled out. That's fine. There's just a couple more ballots that needed to come in and they didn't come in yet. So, I mentioned this too, and I think this would be interesting as a presentation. When I was talking to Jason the other day, I think it was Elliot and not Alex, but it was drought management. He actually came out to Jason's farm and got to see a working farm in a drought and what it did to the chickens and the cattle and to the crops. And so I think that would be a great insight to share with you guys based on this crop. Doug and I were talking on the way in. We both saw it, but the corn out here is just perished out there. There's going to be no corn crop this year. But as we talk about agriculture and water and how you plant your crops and how you need water, I think we can get a little bit of indications from either Elliot or Jason, because they met at Jason's farm, to look at some of those impacts. So that might be interesting just for the RBC to hear. Yes.
We've got to,
Mhm.
check on last year had we put in place a year rain, looking at a revenue of about $1.6 million on one check off. We might be looking at $4. So that doesn't tell you.
And that's all directly dependent on the amount of moisture and water you get, right? From whatever source.
All that revenue marketing is directly affected by that. That would be something you know.
Yeah, and I think it'd be interesting because we've said that we're not going to do a special meeting just for that or anything. But I think if we got time to do a presentation on what just the small lessons learned we saw versus last year and this year, even us with gardens have seen that the yield we got last year versus this year. And I know the farmers have seen a big change based on rainfall and just low flow conditions, I guess. So might be interesting to hear to your point. Yes.
One comment, and you know, I'm not a farmer. I don't know how this works, but our CEO came in right before this and he was talking, and he just had talked to a farmer who said, you know, our irrigation system is made to supplement water, and with the amount of rain we had, you can't irrigate enough to do this. So it's you know, that's another thing that needs to be rolled into this, is we say, well, every worst case drought, irrigation is can't be the complete answer because it runs out.
And the drought sneaks up on you sometimes, right? It's really slow. John's shaking his head from the Duke standpoint too, right?
Yeah.
You think it's not going to do it, but then at one point it has a breakthrough and it hammers you, doesn't it? And so, anyway, just some thoughts there. Okay. Before I wrap up, any other comments? I want to give it to Cliff for a minute and then I'll go to Buddy and we'll wrap up. Any other comments? Schedule wise, we'll meet as a leadership team. I think probably what I'm hearing of activity going on, we'll probably go virtual in August. I'll say that out of the gate. Brooke's shaking her head. We'll need to talk to Scott and everybody about that. I don't think there's a big reason to pull us all together. We really don't have a lot of stuff to just work on as a group face to face. So I think I'd rather probably do an hour or two meeting like this virtually for August. And then I think Brooke, the leadership team, can kind of look at the calendar for the next couple of months and try to figure out a good estimate of when we need to be live and when we need to be.
Suggest it would be in person for review of any of the model results.
Yeah, we get that in September, probably back in September together.
Yep.
Okay. So, Cliff, talk about the tour today. Were you happy? You think we saw some good stuff?
I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it showed you some of the things that, you know, there's a lot more going on, of course, but we hit some highlights that were pretty important for us right now. And I hope we were glad the facility worked out. Sorry that couldn't get Tom to stay around for it, but, still, everything has worked out very well, I thought. So just let me know if you have any other comments, and those that didn't come, you missed a good time.
No,
Missed.
I think I was impressed by the biggest South Carolina-based company here, the length of time the company's been here. It's just the cooling tower dropping your surface water withdrawals 4 million by about half, that kind of thing. And just seeing all the activities they have here is pretty impressive just on this one footprint. I'm really lucky to get to see it and appreciate you having all of us. And we're gonna thank Eric for lunch. Eric, I think Nature Conservancy bought us lunch today. Is that right? You kind of jumped down on that. So thank you for that.
It is outside.
Nature Conservancy is always a good partner anywhere I go, any state I go, any region I go. So thank you very much for that, Eric. Okay. Buddy, final thoughts, and you can dismiss us here.
All right, well, Cliff, again, thank you for that. It's good to see the do especially public trade companies. They need to make every dime they can because they're liable to the stockholders. But Matt, thank you for putting that on the SharePoint site, putting everything in one central location. I've been able to go in there and see them, so it worked out good. I think when you go in there one time with your email, you'll get a code. Go ahead and type that code in and gives you access to all the chapters on that one site. That's a good one-stop shop to have them all in one location. And again, the folks that are reviewing these and making comments, that's taking time. Certainly, that's appreciated for you to get into it and see the I guess the direction that those chapters are going, so you can have some info about the cover crops. That's good insight. That's the reason ag is represented on the board for you to see that special that interest group. Thank you for the comments there, and you'll be sending that to Matt, right? Some comments and that. I don't know that he was able to get everything you were saying.
Yeah, I'll take care of it.
All right. That's it for me. Good to be here. Good to see everybody.
All right, guys. Tom, anything from you before you turn us off?
That's it, man.
All right, then I guess we're dismissed when you click us off. I wish y'all were all here for lunch, but we're gonna eat some lunch. We'll eat your lunch for you today.
That sounds
All right. See you on August. Bye.
All right, thanks.